Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Philly Speaks Philosophy live on WHUM Channel 101 on your FM dial, where we discuss various philosophical works and their authors. I'm your host, Harold Cofer. If you can remember, last week we dove into Sophocles' play, Antigone, and outlined how it relates to human morality. For this week, we'll be starting the first of our three-part series featuring Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy. We'll be starting out with the first of three poems entitled Inferno. Then next week, Purgatorio, and wrapping up the series with Paradiso the following week. Now, before we begin our summary, let's chat a little bit about Dante the author. Dante Alighieri was born in the 14th century. He was born in Florence, Italy. He's most remembered for his work, Divina Commedia, or Divine Comedy, that we'll be discussing, which illustrates his journey through the afterlife via hell, purgatory, and heaven. Now, many people are unaware that Dante was exiled from Florence because of his political beliefs, doomed to roam through Italy until he eventually died. During this time is when he wrote the Divine Comedy, which we can assume helped to bring some of the imagery that he used to illustrate his path. Some more things about the Divine Comedy. Because he wanted to reach a larger audience, he chose to write this work in a language that people could understand. So he used the common language at that time rather than write it in Latin. This allowed for his work to be published to a larger audience. He referenced many people in his poems, some that he admired, such as famous Roman poet Virgil, and his childhood love Beatrice, who, unfortunately, she died before they could wed. So, as stated earlier, Dante basically walked through the 9 circles of hell. Each one of those levels was entitled something different for whatever particular sin that person did. The first was entitled limbo, then lust, gluttony, greed, anger, heresy, violence, fraud, and then last, treachery. So on to our summary. As stated earlier, Inferno was the first part of the Divine Comedy, and Dante begins his quest in a forest about to be attacked by 3 beasts that prevented him from going any further. Those 3 beasts were a lion, a panther, and a she-wolf. Unfortunately for Dante, he is rescued from these beasts by Roman poet Virgil, who he idolized much of his work. Virgil was sent by Dante's childhood love Beatrice to serve as his guide. So, Virgil and Dante begin their journey through hell after passing through a gate with the inscription above it reading, Abandon all hope, all ye who enter here." After passing this gate, Dante and his tour guide enter Limbo, which was the first circle of hell. Limbo is occupied by unbaptized souls. Their punishment was never being allowed in heaven. Only a few souls that made it to Limbo were granted release from this circle. Souls such as Moses. But all other else souls were doomed to stay there. Dante, he runs into other prominent souls there, such as Socrates and Julius Caesar. The second circle, lust, is where Dante sees people who were adulterous during their lifetime. He sees Cleopatra and Helen of Troy. During this circle, souls are tormented by strong winds blowing them around. This is meant to symbolize the restlessness of a person led by their desires. The circle of gluttony is the third circle they encounter. Souls are guarded by a hideous monster while being forced to lie in a slush that comes from icy rain. The souls in this circle are being punished for their overindulgence in worldly possessions. In the fourth circle of hell, greed. It's divided into 2 fractions: people who hoarded possessions and people who lavishly spent. These 2 fractions were forced to roll humongous rocks at each other as they were jousting. According to Dante, he encountered many popes and clergymen in this circle as well. The fifth circle of hell, Dante and Virgil had to cross the river Styx by boat, where souls were punished for anger, forced to fight on the river while some souls were drowning below. In the sixth circle of hell, this was entitled Heresy, souls were condemned to eternity in flaming tombs. The seventh circle of hell was divided, much like the fourth circle of hell, but this was divided into three rings. The outer ring housed murderers. The middle ring was occupied by people who committed suicide, and these individuals were forced to take the form of either trees or bushes, while the inner ring was for people guilty of blasphemy and sodomites, and they were in a desert of burning sand. Which brings us to the eighth circle. In the eighth circle residing people who were fraudulent. It's also divided as well, but it was divided by numerous ditches with bridges between them. Dante and Virgil had to travel through this circle in the back of a flying monster. And finally, the ninth circle of hell. This is where Satan resides. Souls are trapped in the icy lake and positioned according to how severe their worldly sin was. Here's where Dante encountered Judas, who coincidentally was in the fourth and final level of this circle. So Dante and Virgil would exit by sliding down Satan's back, and they wound up back at the entrance. As you can tell, Dante told a story with a great deal of symbolism to make his story more intense. So now that we've outlined Dante's Inferno, the first book in this trilogy, let's take it to the phone lines. I'm going to open up the phone lines. I believe we have Tori on the line. Hello, Tori. Thank you for calling Philly Speaks Philosophy.
Hello, Carl. Let me just say that I love your show and I listen to you every week.
Well, thank you for calling in. What can I do for you?
Well, I want to know, first of all, are there any parts of Dante's Inferno that help your understanding of culture?
Well, actually, I think Dante showed how people can harbor feelings. In his poem, he spent a lot of time reflecting on Greeks, mainly being the ones in hell. Dante, being Roman, during this time had a great deal of disdain for the Greeks as a result of the whole Trojan horse situation. So I think his symbolism shows a good representation of how we are responsible for our sins.
Okay, I can see that. I have just one more question. Actually, two.
And what's that?
Are there any moments that contribute to your culture and values of society? And would you recommend Dante's Inferno to someone else?
Okay, that's a very good question. Actually, I think being responsible for our actions would be what's most familiar to me and to my culture, to answer your first question. Dante used vivid imagery to bring that point home with the way he describes the punishments these souls encountered. And I would definitely recommend this text to others because of the underlying morality messages throughout the text.
Thank you, Earl.
Well, you're very welcome. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have this week. So I want to thank you all for tuning in to Philly Philosophy Speaks. Again, I am your host, Harold Cofer. And remember to tune in next week when we'll be talking about the second installment, Purgatorio. Until then, keep your radios turned to WHUM 101 on your FM dial.